Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good ever what time of day it happens to be that you are listening to the Tattooed Teacher podcast. On this episode, I have the amazing Vince Wall. Now, Vince is a history teacher. He's a blogger. He's a PhD candidate. He's doing all sorts of stuff. He is a innovative educational lead. He's doing an AI development program in the school he's at. Vince, welcome to the show. How the hell do you do all of that?
Hey Phil, thank you. That's fabulous intro. Um, Look, I feel pretty busy, but it's all about passion, I suspect. My honest answer would be that I don't really see all of that as a job. I think it'd be probably more of a chore if I wasn't doing some of those things. So yeah, it's a bit of fun.
That's a good way to look at it. I mean, and I guess if you look at things that we do on our everyday, and things that we want to do to grow, improve, challenge, whatever they might be, if we don't see them as something that we want to do, yeah, then they certainly would get very tiresome. Um, so what's Vince? You're doing all this sort of stuff, and you're saying it's your passion, and it's just something you love doing, even though it's as busy as it is. What's your why behind it? Why do you do all this stuff? Why education?
It's funny. I was watching previous podcasts where you asked that, and I thought that question has come up to me so many times in the last few years. It's unbelievable. Um, when I started my PhD, which was about a month or so after Leon first started his, and I was looking at emergent technologies, and he'd actually picked AI, in about October 2022, and I sort of pivoted a little bit after him. Um, I I was approached by Alison Bedford at UniSQ and said, "Would you like to do your PhD?" And I'd always thought I might do that, probably when I retire, which is getting closer all the time. And I thought, look, it's hard to find a supervisor you actually like and can work with. So I said yes, and I'd known him for years. In one of our initial meetings, she said, "So what's your why?" And I actually had to really go off. I had absolutely no idea, and I mean that really genuinely. And I suspect a lot of listeners out there and people watching the video might actually have that same reaction. No idea. And so I actually went off and I read about it and I thought about why do I even teach history? Why that? Why not other things? All the other incarnations that I've had in my teaching career, which is approaching 40 years. Why have I done these bits? And look, it's going to sound a little bit almost, I don't know, almost a bit trite or naive or something. I'm not quite sure. But I really put it down to I want to make a difference. I mean, I wouldn't be doing my job as a teacher if it didn't put groceries in the basket. I think
Yeah.
I'd still need to do that. But there's other jobs out there. So why this job? Why spend so much time looking at education, thinking about education? And I take it into that making a difference. And that making a difference, even though I'm in a school that you could probably call very privileged and so on, is probably a difference in, I guess, groups who traditionally perhaps haven't had a lot of voice and agency. So I'm working in an all girls school. And so it's interesting how I've moved into a space where I'm playing a role in allyship in making a difference and supporting women's education, making a difference. Because I grew up incredibly privileged, white middle class family, all boys school, private education, all that. Yeah, making a difference is my why answer, Phil.
I would you couldn't get a better why. Like, I think every teacher as well, whether they know how to verbalize it, but um, it's they want to have an impact somewhere. Or no, I think people in general want to make a difference in whatever field it is. Now, whatever your chosen vocation is, you can make a difference in that. Um, but yeah, it's one of the reasons. Like, I never thought I'd see myself on this side of the desk, like, because I was a rat bag student. Um, again, like yourself, I was very, very privileged. I was very blessed with my parents working hard to send me and my brothers all to a private school down in Sydney. Did I take full advantage of that? No. School was a social experiment. I thought it worked I thought it was a huge success. Um, You look at my report cards, not so much. However, look, I got through it, and I learned a whole bunch of stuff. And there are teachers now who I look back on and go, yeah, you were the one who got me through, pulled me up when I needed to do it, was pastoral, cared for me, gave me a right bollocking when I needed it. But their ultimate thing was they wanted to make a difference in young people's lives. So I think, and to do it for 40 years, like
Nearly. Steady
nearly.
on.
Well, I mean, I've just ticked over sort of 23 years, I think, teaching now. I came into it a little bit later in the game. But yeah, it's one of those things where I'd never thought I'd sort of stay in it this long. But again, it's one of those things, probably like yourself, it's even though we might be teaching the same things every year, slightly different. Every cohort is different.
I can't teach the same way twice. If ever I'm timetabled the same year level, same subject, I can't deliver the same lesson. And I think there's an element of responsiveness to that. I feel like I'm constantly reading the room and looking for the kid that sounds like a bit like you when you were in school and going, yeah, what's Philip up to? Sort of pull that one over here. But I don't know if you answered this yourself, Phil. You steered around it. What's your why?
Mine is that it's to help these young men and women to find their level of success, to look after, and for me, it's to look after those and who are more likely to be misunderstood. Because so many of these young people that we deal with on a daily basis, they're going through all sorts of trauma that we don't understand. They're trying to work out who the hell they are, and then they're trying to work out where they fit, and they're doing all this sort of stuff. And sometimes they lash out, sometimes they do things that don't make sense. But they're the ones who I sort of, and the troublemakers, they're the ones who I sort of gravitate towards, because they're really just trying to work out where they are, where they fit in this world. And I know what it's like to be looked upon like that. So that's one of the things. It's one of the reasons why I do it. And I have fun. Like, I enjoy it.
It's not a bad way to spend the day.
No, look, there's challenges and
Oh, yeah.
frustrations and stresses, and some days you just go, I just don't want to go to work today. But overall, it's a good living. It's a good job. It's a good vocation. So
I think if you get to the end of your career, whatever it is, and you can say that you've contributed to something good and social, made the world a bit better a place, brought a bit of hope, brought a bit of justice, brought a bit of wisdom, perhaps. I think that's probably not that would be a life well spent, I suspect. And I know it's sort of a bit down and a bit heavy, a bit existential for the chat, maybe, but yeah. And look, and I think that does connect to other parts of what I've done over the years and what I'm doing. And it was interesting. I was saying to you before we came on air, I recently had to do a presentation for my studies, and again, that question of why came up. Why is your study worthwhile? Why is what you're doing of value? And it was again about if we could just get the right sort of ideas or even ask the right sort of questions to take us on the next step of the journey to making a positive difference in the world. Not a bad way to spend your life. And a conference table full of experts sort of went, oh, yes, that's very wise. So I won. So,
hey, well, look, you're well on your way, and look, it's one of those things where it's like and you nailed it. It's like, if we can ask the right questions, because it's not about finding the answers. It's about asking the question to challenge your thought, and hopefully you find the right answer. But you're never going to find the right answer unless you're asking the right questions.
And right enough. I think that this idea of being locked in on, well, maybe in some respects, if you're working in design and tech or working in a subject where you need a precise, correct answer of where that bolt goes into a construction and so on, yeah, sure. I don't want my dentist going, that's a right enough answer. I want him to put the filling in the right spot. But at the same time, in history, sometimes it's an answer that is correct enough on the basis of evidence and upon reflection to allow us to get to the next level of problem. And I think that's not a bad way of living life at times too.
Yeah, and I think that right enough actually changes over time
Mm,
because we change, our perspectives change, our understanding change. And I mean, being a history teacher, I mean, you're looking back at what has happened, but in a way you're also going, well, how do we move forward with the understanding of what has happened in the past?
mm,
And what do we do with that? Especially, I mean, nowadays, I mean, there's so much stuff that I mean, you and I growing up, we're not that far apart in age. Some of the beliefs and language and things that we used as teenagers and even, in our early 20s, you just can't do anymore. And it's not that what we did back then was necessarily wrong. It's just we didn't know.
mm.
And then we've grown and we've learned and we're changing stuff. So it's I guess it's a even though it's looking back, it's a constant progression in going forwards.
My study, which does connect to AI and so on, takes the study of history and the pedagogy around teaching history in that direction. Um, for fairly obvious reasons, history has a past looking dimension to it. And increasingly, I think history is challenged to answer a question not so much of knowing your why in this case, but the so what. So I've learnt about these events in Australia's past, or I've learnt about these events in world history. What is it that I carry forward into my world? And in my own sort of work that I'm studying, it's very hard to capture here. It's the idea of developing a future oriented pedagogy for history that's enabling agency through the use of technology. So there's a few strands going on there. But in that future orientation, I'm interested in seeing history becoming reparative, looking at how we deal with the injustices of the past, how we build upon the disadvantages, the inequities, and so on to somehow repair that damage, and also generating something better and new, a generative side. So I'm talking about a form of pedagogy that's enabled by technology that generates something better for the future and repairs some of the damage of the past. So it takes us on a reconciliation journey. It takes us on a journey of inclusion and so forth, which I think is really important. And overlaid with that is the view that there's a technological challenge going on that suggests we can't keep doing business the way it always has been in our subjects. AI has shifted the way I teach. The term is disintermediated, that the kids do not get all of their information from me. It used to be when you're at school, obviously I'm much younger than you, but when you're at school, the teacher would get up the front and they were essentially the sole source of knowledge. They put up that overhead transparency sheet. Maybe you're a bit older than that or younger than that, but I would have the overhead transparency sheet out. Kids would write it down, maybe off the blackboard, they'd write it down. The teacher was the sole source of knowledge. Even textbooks weren't used very much. And now kids have got an abundance of information, multiple sources, whether they be archives, different perspectives, ranging social media through to artificial intelligence generated. And the teacher is just one of the voices from which the kids are drawing information. So we can't keep doing business the same way as part of what I'm looking at. And if we can't do it the same way, what's it going to turn into?
Yeah, look, I 100% agree with you there. We can't be doing things the same way. I mean, you any teacher, you walk into a classroom and the kids they they want to they don't just want to know the what's. They want to know the hows, the whys, the whens, the wheres, the who, and then the what's next. I had a conversation with someone, and I've said it a couple of times externally. I don't think I've said it on the podcast, but I had this one. It not a teacher. They're going, well, kids should just sit down and just listen, and they should just do as they're told. And I go, it's not how it works. I said, do you do that at your place of work, or is there dialogue? Is there, are you occasionally combative? Is there disagreements? Yeah, but that's work. At school and I said no, because kids want to know the why, the when, the what, how does it affect me, and why the hell should I put my phone away and not rely on a computer to give me the information because it can give me faster and better than you can. And they look at you in this almost I can't even think. I don't want to say disgust but they're looking at you like, no, that's not how you should treat children. And it's just like, well, they're going to be the leaders of. They're the future leaders of us. They're going to be taking care of us. They're going to be looking after our futures. So we need to give them voice. We need to give them agency and allow them to learn in a way that benefits them and will benefit society in the future.
Yeah, look, it's really interesting, that almost nostalgic view of the past. It's like, I heard on the news in the last 24 hours, something along the lines, when we were kids, we respected the cops. When we were at school, we always had to listen to the teacher. And I thought to myself, well, you're partly remembering the past here, but there was a whole other side of that. As a Brisbane boy, I remember the Fitzgerald inquiry into police corruption, and there was no questioning of the police going on in that world there. I think there are some very good reasons why we need to appropriately question authority and challenge, and certainly come from a position where we have a knowledge base. I think one of the dangers is that we can have a lot of questioning going on without any discipline and grounding in rationality and evidence and so on. We see that playing out in the world. That not all opinions are equal, and some are supported by information and fact and research and so on. But we absolutely need to empower kids to operate in a very different world to the one that was existing, when I was a kid at school in the 70s and early 80s. I think kids are entitled to ask why. And I think we as teachers should be able to give them a decent, authentic answer to the asking why too. And that holding on to it's my authority because I said so is probably not only unhelpful, but it's also for a society probably not healthy. We want to have a robust debate. We also want it evidence-based and supported by reason, and have our community educated to a point where they can handle differences of opinion without turning hostile and so forth. I don't know if I articulated that very well for the first night of the holidays, but I think there's a lot going on when people say, oh, look, kids should just sit down, shut up, do what they're told.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, and it's right. I think to a certain extent we've lost that ability to, or society in general. So generalization, society in general has lost the ability to have a robust discussion, to be on complete opposite ends of the argument, but still, when the argument's finished, shake hands, say thank you very much, and still be able to converse and treat each other with respect and courtesy. And I think that comes from going into an argument or a debate that's well researched from your perspective, that you take into account the other person's perspective, but you don't have to agree with it. But you come out with that healthy respect, and I think that's probably the news media loves the beat up of the young kid, arguing with the cop or
Yep.
yelling at the teacher. And look, that does happen. It has happened. It will happen, and I've never had a table flipped in my classroom, and I've never been pinned up against a wall by a student. I know a few people who have, but the amount of teachers compared to those stories, it's few and far between.
I think there is a moral panic, and we're way off the education. We'll steer it back for you soon, but there is a
Yeah.
moral panic around youth crime. And I'd love to see the statistics of how many crimes are reported where they're over 18. And I actually would argue that we might have an issue with crime and the way in which we deal with offenders and that in society that isn't just youth based. I think there's the moral panic on the youth. But, we could probably build an argument there's an adult crime pandemic out there too. And maybe we need to deal with that. And where maybe there's a whole lot stack of stuff in society that education is part of the answer for. And these simplistic narratives that strip away complexity are not very helpful. There's this polarizing effect. You're either in favor of explicit teaching, direct instruction, or you're an inquiry person. And if you're an inquiry person, that's discovery, right? So No, the reality is that there's a space in there where both coexist and need each other if we're going to do
100%.
something very good. But there is that polarizing that's, I think, showing up in the media. It's showing up in online educational conversations. Um, it's easy fodder for likes or for follows or whatever, but and for the media, but it's not very helpful. And I think we as educators need to, I guess, be a bit more outspoken. And maybe that's possibly why I do a bit of this blogging and research, and talking to people like yourself too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it the conversations need to happen, the awareness needs to happen, and like the explicit and inquiry based. You can't, from my experience anyway, like inquiry based is great. Like I do a lot of project based learning. I mean, that's design and technology, always has been, always will be. Um, but you can't get the student to do a good inquiry based project without giving them explicit instruction on how to actually ask a question, or to ask the right question, or to know what to do with the information after they ask the question, or who to go to ask a question. So there's got to be some explicit instruction.
Hmm,
I mean, it just goes
absolutely.
without saying. So
Into the AI space. So, inquiry, the word history apparently means inquiry. And history has this very strong inquiry pedagogy that grows out of people like John Dewey. And there are very good reasons for that and how it's developed over the last century. But in that space, Dewey would say that we actually need very strong teacher guidance in that inquiry space. In my classroom, if I pick an AI example, I explicitly teach the kids how to construct a simple prompt, and I explicitly talk to them about following up with a multi turn iterative chat afterwards. This is not open to what do you all feel, guys? Let's just figure it out as we go along. I'm not going to give you any hints at what works. There is absolutely a direct instruction and explicit teaching moments in that inquiry model. And it's not just on skill, it certainly does apply on skill. I can immediately think of other examples. But there are some factual elements of any study that we need to make sure students understand if they're going to learn the higher order critical thinking skills. So, this idea it's either this or that, and that you can't have something in the middle, is deeply flawed. And there are even people out, I'm noticing online, who are denying that it's that polarized. And it's so easy to go, well, actually, have a look at this information here. Have you seen this article? And yeah, so look, that's one of my rants. And when I was thinking about talking tonight, I thought, do not go down the channel of too many rants. So yeah, so look, there's a lot in there. And I think we as educators play a crucial role in society. And look, and part of that, when you're talking about people pinned up against wall, part of it is ethical choices. Part of it is safety. Okay, all of those elements don't get enough speaking conversation about. I have, out of the 40 years of teaching, about 18 of them were in what could be a pastoral care, student welfare, well-being type roles, behaviour management type roles. Um, like you, I've never had anyone pin me up against the wall and all that kind of thing. There's been a couple of moments over the last, so many decades, where things have happened. Certainly not in my current environment, but
yeah,
um, yeah, it's a very important space that teachers play.
yeah, and I mean, there's being in the space that you're in, especially with your blogging on emerging technologies, especially with generative AI. I mean, that's polarizing in and of itself. And we'll get to that in a minute. But another polarizing thing that we'll talk about, and maybe you read it or saw the the clickbait for it, was Bill Gates saying teachers aren't going to be needed in 5 to 10 years time, and yet one of his memoirs that he wrote was just explaining how important teachers were to him in his development, and his growing up and learning and understanding. And so I think it's another thing to go, well, yeah, this AI thing and these tutors and chatbots, they'll be able to give students whatever they need quicker and better and blah 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 blah. But as you and I know, getting information is one thing, but using it, that's where knowledge comes in and understanding. So there's knowledge and wisdom. I can have all the information in the world. I know what I should be doing. And I know I should be eating better. I know I should be, having, less to drink, or, not having my Coke. A lot, Coke is one of my biggest vices. And so I know I have the information. There's medical journals coming through, but yet I still do what I want to do.
Mm.
And
I think, well, I resisted the temptation to click on the Bill Gates story. I saw it there and I thought, for a guy who's doing so much great stuff in the world, what are you talking about, Bill? And
yeah,
so I didn't want to go down there. And look, there's plenty of things online to annoy me at the moment. So I
oh,
felt I chose not to. So I steered away from the Bill story there. But I do suspect that the kind of comments that we don't need teachers anymore kind of indicate a misunderstanding, sometimes growing out of edtech, and there's an increasing pushback on some of the big edtech providers.
and
Uh,
rightly
a,
so.
mis- yeah, um, a misunderstanding of what teachers actually do. I think some of the best edtech work out there is phenomenal. There are some amazing people who absolutely get what teachers are doing. There's a couple of little companies. I'll name one that isn't there anymore that I absolutely loved, and it was fairly controversial. Microsoft people know this. Flipgrid. Flipgrid was phenomenal. Flipgrid allowed us to collaborate and share ideas and see students work all through a video type space. Now, the platform was bought by Microsoft and got turned into Flip, and it just isn't operating the same way anymore. But there are plenty of edtech providers who are great, but there are also a whole stack who are coming very much from a technical point of view, who have a particular model and understanding, perhaps like that guy you were talking to, an understanding of what teachers do. And teachers need to play a part in that debate and push back a little bit. The more technology I'm using, and I love technology, I love a good tool that helps me do my job. And the more technology I bring into my classroom and into my teaching, the more important it is to bring the human.
Yeah.
I feel like I am much more authentically present in my classroom because of AI. So someone was saying to me at work recently, "Oh, when are you using AI? Are you using it for this and that?" And I actually felt that we talk about the ubiquity of AI, but it is something that I've encouraged the kids, and they're all on one-to-one devices, and they are dropping in and out constantly, clarifying what I'm saying, clarifying wording, checking information. They're using AI constantly. I think sometimes poorly. I think there is a place for a search engine, and then they're using AI as a search engine. I go, no, 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 explicit teaching moment, don't do that. Okay, and go this way. But it's being used constantly, but I'm increasingly saying, let's stop, close your device. What does this mean to you? Let's get into a yarning circle. This is a device free moment. The human matters a lot more, and getting plenty of people out there, including Ethan Mollick, talk about having the human in the loop. But we need to make that very much what we're doing. If the AI tools can do so much and do it so well, teachers have to change role. And that role is going to emerge. It'll change by subject. I think it's going to change within subject specific pedagogies. So, what you're doing in design and technology will be very different to me in a classroom. We'll both use AI at some point. I'm confident of that. There'll be different tools available and so on. But I suspect you're not sitting down as often in a yarning circle and going, so what is our deeper emotional learning that we've got out of building that, I don't know, assembling that engine? I think that might be coming out of me dealing with the civil rights issue. This is sort of the space we play into. But the human is so important. And teachers are going to need to have a good hard look at themselves, I suspect, and go, how present are they? It's easy to hide behind the PowerPoint and read the slide at the kids. There's no real human involved in that moment. And if that's all you're doing, I'm confident AI will, all things being equal, progress to a point where it can deliver that and better than you can. But the emotional connection, the wisdom, the creativity, I'll say hesitantly, this is what we're going to bring to it. And I think maybe that's part of it too, is we have to work out as humans, what is our essential humanity that we want to hold on to in that space? And maybe that answer isn't clear yet.
Oh yeah, I think it's as clear as mud at the moment. But you are 100% right, and you know we read probably a lot of these same articles and follow similar people. And you know, like Ethan's the human in the loop. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the best educators I know are those who, first and foremost, it's about the relationship with the student. It's about gaining their trust. It's about building that rapport so that they can then actually speak into the lives of these children or these students, these young men and women, depending on where they're at in their journey. Um, because without that relationship, and it work, and it's across the board. Let's just get out of school. I was talking to a guy the other day. So he's in ed tech doing some great stuff. Salty Sharks. I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, the VR stuff, and his passion is to, like Rob's passion is to educate and to get it out there and to help those who need it and give opportunities. But we were chatting very similar lines the other day, and he goes, in business, it's relationship first. I can't just rock up to a meeting and say, "Here, buy this for X amount of dollars," because they're just gonna go, "No." We would need to sit down. We need to talk. We need to work out if we're along the same, the same channels. We have the same lines. We have the same likes, dislikes. We agree on the same sort of principles. Because if you don't, then you got to part ways.
Hmm.
And I guess with students, the same thing. If we can build that relationship, they are going to listen. They're going to mostly listen. I mean, we've been doing this long enough, but
Yeah.
for the better part, they will want to be involved in part of their education.
I think there's something very odd about schools in that in an industrial model that has dominated the way we've worked for the last 100 and something years, we bring all these people together and then make them sit in silence. That really just does not fit for me. I think if we're going to bring, if we're going to sit people in silence, we've got technology, we can sit them in silence anyway. They don't need to come together. So I will actually say to my classes often, why are we coming together? We come together to collaborate, to communicate, to share experience. So when I'm doing a flipped learning model, which I do, I preload content at the beginning of a unit. They come to school for the collaborative activities, the skills work, the complexity, and what I bring to the party is also sense making. And I think those people who aren't so fussed on flipped learning models see it as effectively an online model only, where the information is dumped and there is no interpersonal sense making, collaborative skill connection part going on. I think at a university level, that's really hard. If you've got 3,000 people enrolled in the lectures, some of them don't even bother coming on campus, and so forth, that you might be calling something a flipped model, but really what it is just online delivery of content.
Yeah.
What we can do in schools is we've got a relatively captive audience who, broadly speaking, have to turn up. And they
Yes.
have to be in the room together. And they have to be in the room together with you. So what happens in that communal shared space really matters. I think the power of the what I call a flipped video, I think there's probably better terms with people like John Bergman, but the video I make where I'm talking about Australia's involvement in World War One or something like that, the power of that is that students have multiple entry points. They can sit there, they can engage with it on their own, they can stop, replay the video, come back to it later on if they want to, slow it down, skip forward. They've got control over their own learning. Then when they come to school, and I need checks for understanding to make sure that actually happens, because you know what? Some kids might not do that in their own time.
No, come
They,
on.
look, this is why I'm doing a PhD. Some kids might not be doing that. So I need to have some sort of follow up on that. You'd be amazed, though, how many people just skip that kind of obvious gap. So I then have to check they do it, then have a valid, meaningful experience that is shared and communal in the classroom. And I also need to bring together the 24, 25 different kids, all with slightly different takes on what I had said. I need to bring them all together into a shared understanding where some will ask questions, some will make additional notes. This whole flipped model is amazing. When we infuse it with AI, where they can then, if they've got the skills, create their own 24/7 AI tutor that sits there and gives them additional feedback one to one at home while they're doing that flipped work or while they're working on some skills work in class, having, if you like, an electronic tutor with them while I'm zipping around the room. It's like circuit training for me. I'm surprised I'm carrying so much weight because, honest to God, when I'm in a room, I'm on the move.
Yeah.
And in that classroom space, AI is putting a tutor, if the kids can use it well, a tutor into their conversation anytime they want it. But they need skills on how to use that tutor and how to engage with it. Yet they're still learning, like we are. So this, what I'm coming at is this flipped AI infused, also UDL model for learning history. And it's one that the more I think about it, it's more about the humanity at the core. And I think this carries implications for assessment.
Yeah.
When people are sort of going, the kids are just handing over a take home assessment task to AI, I'm wondering why that is. And people
Yeah.
like Jason Lodge play into that. Is it that they have no connection, see no value in that task, and therefore are pushing it away? Is it that they are way too busy, overwhelmed with assessment calendars, and that happens in some of the big, sort of highly academic schools? The
Yep.
assessment calendar is full of checkpoints. They have no time to do that, plus play sport, plus do a musical instrument, plus hold down a part-time job and see their friends, keep their boyfriend, girlfriend sort of in the loop, have constant interruptions with the phone. It seems like prime area to be set up for a labour-saving device like AI.
Yeah.
I want my kids to be so connected to that learning that they don't want to hand it over. They want help perhaps from it. They want guidance, scaffolding. But I want them so present to the task that they don't want to give it over. They'd rather keep control of it themselves. Now, I'm getting told that this is naive and sort of pie in the sky. It's not the paradigm the world operates in, apparently. But it's certainly, I'm sort of very much going, well, why not? If we're not aspirational, who will be?
Yeah, and I think that those making those statements are slightly misguided, maybe even a little bit, dare I say, naive to where society is heading. Because if we look at um, we look at social justice, we look at social enterprise, we look at entrepreneurship, all those things are gaining momentum within society. The big corporations, big industry, whatever they might be, they're still there. But a lot of people are going, you know what? I don't want to do that. I want to do my thing. And so they attach themselves, they take ownership and they don't want to give it up.
Mm.
And they take pride in it and they want to do that. And I think what you're doing within your classroom, by the sounds of it, is setting up your students for success like that, to go, you know what? I don't need to rely on, I'm going to use that tool because it's going to help me get to where I want to go quicker, but it's not going to take away my thought, my creativity, my critical thinking. It's not going to take away my voice. It's going to help me amplify my voice.
And someone like Jason Lodge, whose work, if people aren't across what Jason's doing at the University of Queensland and with TEXA and so on, I think people need to be aware of Jason. Um, he really does emphasise, as others do, the process of assessment rather than the product now. And I feel that, at least in my subject, and I'm pretty strict on this subject specialty pedagogy, that I don't know how it works in your world, but I suspect there'll be a similarity. I need to be present in the journey of kids doing that work. That idea of only conferencing in a class once every 3 or 4 weeks or something doesn't work for me. I need to be kind of constantly popping in over someone's shoulder, having a chat. It's bouncing back and forth, following up. Now, I suspect in a design and tech sort of workshop space, you need to be doing that too, because there's a safety element. There's an element of see how that drill hole's going in that way. You need to be doing that. That conferencing happens all the time. But that's not the case in every classroom. And it's something that teachers have to get their head around. I can't farm out a history assignment and say, I'll check in on you in 2 or 3 weeks' time. I need to be there in the journey and deal with it all, which is why I'm doing my circuit training running around the room. That being part of the process really matters, not just handing in a set of the prompts you've used, not just handing in some sort of written reflection, though I'm a big fan of the acknowledgement of assistance. And I mean all assistants, tutors, parents helping, your mate down the road, your big sister. I want you to acknowledge all, because AI is just one of the forms of assistance you might be getting.
Yeah.
And your teachers for that matter. I want to be part of the process where I can see what the kids are doing in every step of the way and not do it in a inauthentic, performative way, if you like, that allows me just to say, well, I've ticked off checkpoint 1. That's really time intensive. And where I was hoping to land with this was it raises a question of how well teachers are resourced. So it's exhausting. The role of teacher is changing. The expectations of teachers will change. I think we will value, at least in some schools, we will value that very human role of teachers, and that needs to be supported. And there's so much I could go into this space, Phil, but I'll stop here in a tick for you. I wonder if, in terms of equity, we've got to be careful of a couple of things. In some school environments, we may see this, if you like, elite level teaching going on where the teacher is fully humanly present. Kids are working in hybrid mode with AI, getting this very rich experience. But in terms of teacher shortages, what if EdTech was able to farm out a product where the kids could sit in silence, put their headphones in, deal with the AI, it grades everything, and they're just going into, if you like, a high-tech form of industrial model rote learning using AI, and the teacher in those classrooms isn't there to provide a human presence, there to provide a monitorial type presence. Are they doing their job? And you could have a very lowly skilled adult in the room perhaps to do that. And I wonder if an inequity you've got to be watching for is the baseline rollout EdTech everywhere, and some get the very human space. And I suspect that might be tied to income and a whole stack of other factors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even that, what you're talking about, that industrial style, it's AI, it's all delivered online. There's everyone sits there. How is that different to what schools started out in getting people ready for the industrial revolution, getting them, okay, we want you to just do as you're told, sit in your cubicle, sit in on your factory line and just do that. How is that different? Whereas, like you're saying, you're constantly running around the room, you're checking in, you're being involved in the learning and within the assessment. Because I know, I mean, I have to be like, if I'm not moving around the room, if I'm not helping the kids, even though I use similar tools like with the flipped style videos, we create the tutorials because some kids aren't at class. Some kids have got something on. They've got to go to a music tuition. They might miss that key thing. But if I've got a tutorial video on there, they can jump back on there. They can ask it. But then I still have kids who I give them these videos, they watch them, and they're clearly set out. Yet they go, I just don't get it. How do I don't understand? And so I'm still in that loop because they've got all the information, they've got all the tools right in front of them. Yet they need that wisdom of, you've just got to it's that human touch. Even though it's technology, it's still a human touch in making it work. So, and I think that's where it is. And you were talking about inequity. I think that's even within schools. I mean, you work in, as you're saying, you work in a more elite system, and you would see inequity with your students probably tell you as well, because they're not backwards in coming forwards when they think they're being a disservice is being performed in another class. So have you, I mean, do you see that in your school, or do you see that in outside conversations where you've got some teachers like you and I who are integrating these new tools and technologies in a safe and responsible manner, and then there are other teachers who just go, nah, brakes on, it's not happening because it's cheating, or it's this, or it's that, or it's I'm scared of it. It's, how do we start to then try and balance that inequity?
I'm in a tremendously privileged spot. So, broadly speaking, I could say there will be some teachers who are at different points in their journey of learning and skill set. Like, seriously, I'm doing my PhD and reflecting on this. I don't have a life. I basically spend my time thinking about this all the time. So I'm atypical and possibly unhealthily atypical, right? You're running a podcast on education, right? I'm here talking to you on it, and it's our holidays.
Yeah.
There are some people out there who've got balance in their life, apparently. So, look, I'm an early adopter, and not everyone's going to be at my stage, and probably nor should they. I would argue we're probably quite risk taking and so forth, and and I would think appropriate risk takers, but not everyone's in that same spot, and that's going to be the same in every school. Like I'm quite happily saying, well, I'm maybe 10 years off retirement. I wonder how engaged in learning new things I might be when I'm 6 months off retirement or a year off retirement, or if I've got sick family members or I'm struggling with some sort of mental health issue myself and so on. So I think we've got to be a bit hesitant, and kids don't see that, of course, but we need to be a bit hesitant of, where different people are, because and you didn't mean this, but I have heard it said in places where it almost carries an element of judgment. And I'm going to be guilty of that myself, where I'm going, dear God, why couldn't I get, it's not that hard. Well, maybe for some people where they are right now, it could be. I do think schools need to look at very much how they facilitate and support the learning of these new skills. Something I've blogged about today, and it'll probably be pumped out automatically in the next week or so, is raising the idea of we really need to be having professional learning communities of staff. That some places do this tremendously well, some places are in the middle, and some places don't. The idea I was thinking, teach meets within staff would be pretty fantastic. And I don't think many places are doing that. They might have little showcase moments and so forth. So, as schools, we need to give people time and space to learn, to share those ideas and so forth. Now, then scale that up. So, my school is a decent sized school. We're not at 2,000, but we're pushing in that direction, students. There are schools in the Brisbane metropolitan area who are closer to 4,000. Now, that would mean in my department, we might have turned up to a departmental a dozen teachers or so, right? If we're at a school that's twice as large, I would assume you've got 24 teachers, perhaps teaching junior history. They're not all trained in history. They're not all passionate about history. That the school itself may have dodgy Wi-Fi and everything else that goes with it. So there are some real challenges for scaling up a lot of what we're wanting to do. We talk about AI will be in every classroom, or all the other emergent tools. VR was something I was very much into a couple of years ago. And just the setup of headsets, dragging them around the school, making sure that the video that I wanted to play would actually go through the Wi-Fi to the kids' headsets. I could spend an hour and a half setting up for a 10-minute engagement activity. And I'm sort of going, that doesn't seem a good use of my time. So I think, do we see inequities already in schools? Yes. Should we be fighting pretty hard to stop that? Yes. I don't want to be too negative and suggest inequities are always going to be part of our system, but I suspect, just given the differences in humans, it's going to be very likely. So, yeah, Phil, yeah.
Yeah, look, I think it's just human nature that there'll always be inequity. There'll always I mean, you're a history teacher, so you would have seen inequities throughout societies all the way from ancient societies to modern day. And I mean, I worked at a school where the school was formed because the university wasn't getting good enough students.
Hmm.
So, even, and we're talking 150 plus years ago, that the university was going, the students aren't good enough. We need to create something better. So, I think it's inequity in education. It's a given. Hopefully, we can just reduce that gap. That we can try and by doing what we're doing, by doing what you're doing, the research that you're doing, and sharing your thoughts. You put your blog out, which again, that's no mean feat to put out. You know, to put your thoughts on paper, to edit them, or not on paper, but to edit them, and then to be vulnerable enough to go, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I've done. It's like this, I'm putting out my thoughts, and it's into the open forum. So I've got to be ready to cop both the good, but also the negative. So, and in a way, I guess that's helping our students do the same thing.
I think something that history shows is change does happen, but sometimes change is uneven and it can be quite slow. So we have this sense when OpenAI dropped ChatGPT in November 2022, there was a sense that it's all going to happen instantly. Something's going to change. The system's going to give. Um, but experience has shown us change takes time, and we're still in very early days yet. Something I'm very hopeful in terms of equity that AI brings is if we can teach every kid to write a quality prompt and enter into a quality multi-turn chat after it, we are actually giving them the ability, even on the free tools that large numbers have got on their mobile phones and so on, we're giving them the tool to build themselves a tutor. Now, it will be a flawed tutor, perhaps in some circumstances. We should have the human follow up. But I think it's Ray Fleming who has the line AI doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be better than the best available person. And there's kids out there who have no one helping them with their homework. There are communities out there with no support, and they're having no support, not just on education, but perhaps on mental health, um, all sorts of ideas. Now, if you've got no mental health support or no counsellors or whatever you want to put into that space, and you are getting halfway decent advice from something on your phone, I think you're in front of nothing. So it
Yeah,
has to be better than the best available person. Now, we're also going to, I think we're wise enough to know that not all counsellors are going to be great, not all psychologists are going to be great, and so on. So AI can actually do a better job in some circumstances than we give it credit for yet. I'm not comfortable with a AI powered student psychologist and so on. There's something just doesn't fit nicely for me there. But if kids are already missing out on that service, if they don't have that, AI is giving them greater access, getting some sort of support. And that's why we need to be watching our tech companies to make sure they've got decent guardrails in front. We want to guide kids to ethical models, safe models. We want to involve our wellbeing teams. I think one of the first times I met you was at the Independent Schools conference on AI last year, I think.
yep,
And there was a long conversation about AI without talking about student wellbeing, safety, involving your school support staff. I think it's a really important space too, and it's still a little bit too quiet out there in looking after kids' safety, ethical use, making sure they're getting good information online. Yeah, so look, there's a lot in this conversation, I know, and we could go for days, but I sort of how's that sounding? I think I lost you there, Phil.
yeah, just a little bit then, but that's all right. Technology, hey.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, I can't believe it. Well, we've been chatting for an hour already, and I'm sure we could go for probably another two, without even, and we are just scratching the surface, of just some of the things that you're doing, some of the things that I've done, some of the things that you're learning about, and you know, it's what what I see that you're doing is for the betterment of your students. You're getting some great benefits from it, in your learning and your growing, and you'll get the floppy hat soon, and you know every doctoral graduate I know is they just can't wait to get that
It's
floppy
all
hat.
about the hat.
It's all about the hat, isn't it? But to get that, you've got to do all the things that you're teaching your students to do.
Mm.
It's about the journey of assessment. It's about learning and being challenged and being pushed and prodded. And I know at times where there's your supervisor may just take the legs right out from underneath you to go, Vince, that's not going to work. Or
Mm.
I had a buddy of mine was doing his masters, and he put in his first draft, and his supervisor goes, and he was doing it at Harvard, and his supervisor goes, look, you'll get your masters. He goes, but this is boring. So he redid his whole masters within half the time that he had.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you've got to be willing to put up with the good as well as the bad.
Putting yourself in the place of the learner, taking risks. I mean, here I am asking kids to, focus on learning and so forth, take a risk on assessment items in high stakes assessment and so on. I've kind of got to live it a little bit. I've got to put myself out there. And I think teachers can get a little bit comfortable. Like I say, I'm very lucky. People are supporting me in my journey. I've got a great school leadership supporting me. I've got family supporting me, encouraging me, and so forth. Um, but it's still a fairly tough journey, and that's teaching me the experiences, or getting me to live the experiences of my kids. And
Yeah.
it's still a risk, and I think that's really important for me. Um, yeah, it is great. It's not really just about the floppy hat, but the floppy hat helps.
Absolutely. We look, anyone who is willing to do the amount of study and learning that you need to do, man, it definitely it's hats off to you, because I mean you're doing it whilst you're working full time and teaching and all the other things that you are doing for it. So look, it's the first night of our holidays, really. It's the
Yep,
Monday of our holidays. So I've got just a couple more questions just to wrap up,
far
just
away.
before we finish up. And so the first one is, do you have a challenge? Now, this could be an ethereal challenge. It could be a realistic challenge, but it's just something to put out there to people who happen to be listening.
Mm, okay. I think the challenge for a lot of teachers is to actually reflect on their why if we come full circle. What is your purpose in the classroom in an age of AI? And what is the purpose of your subject in the age of AI? Does your subject have to change? If so, what to? And how do you facilitate that? And do you have to change? And in how are you going to go about doing that in an age of AI? Because we're in this great disruptive point in human history. It's 1750, the start of the Industrial Revolution, and you're a weaver and you've just seen a steam powered loom, and it's changing your world, and it'll happen real fast. So if you're thinking you've got a long career in you, or even a short one, it's time to buckle up and really come to grips with purpose, both yours and that of your subject. There's a challenge for you.
That's a hell of a challenge, because I know I have to rethink that all the time. And we hear that those cliche comments. AI is not going to replace you. Someone using AI is going to replace you. But I think it's more than that. I think there's so much more than that. But yeah, definitely that's a big challenge. What your why, and what's within for educators. It's like how do we make that difference? So yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. Now, it also wouldn't be the Tattoo Teacher podcast, Vince, if I didn't ask you, do you have any tattoos?
I do not have a tattoo. In fact, when I was first described as a clean skin, I was confused because that meant a bottle without a label on it to me.
Yeah.
But true story is, every now and then when a kid asks me that, I lie. And they say, have you got a tattoo? And I says, yes, but it's in a place that I'm not allowed to show you. And then they stop asking questions, and that's the end of the conversation. I've lost you again there, Phil. You back? Hello, Phil.
Yeah, you just dropped out there.
Yeah,
But
do you want me to answer the question again? This might be one of those edit moments.
I got the point where you've just gone. You actually every now and then you tell the students a mistruth. You miss a bit of misinformation from Mr. Wall, where you say that you do.
Yes, and I say I absolutely do. And then, of course, they want to know what it is and where it is. And I say to them, look, I'm not allowed to show you guys. It's in a spot that is off the table. And they seem to not want to ask any more questions. So that kind of works for me pretty well.
Well, that's like the lie I like to tell. Like, obviously, I can't really hide mine. But they ask, do they hurt? And I just go, no, it's like butterflies flapping their wings. So, uh, hey, and my last but certainly not least question, Vince, is if people want to get in contact with you, they want to follow your blog. Um, what's the best way or they want to find out more about what you're doing within AI, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Look, the most likely place, like a lot of people, is to follow on LinkedIn, Vince Wall on LinkedIn. My blog of sort of half-formed thoughts is disruptedhistory, all one word, .com. And it is essentially me sharing ideas. I put out at least one post a week at the moment, reflecting on how my week has gone and what I'm noticing, the lived experience of teaching and issues that come up. I put in a few reviews of different articles that I think are thought-provoking. So disruptedhistory.com.
I'll make sure I throw those both in the show notes for people.
Well, thanks, Phil.
No worries. But Vince, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing for education. You're probably not going to get much of a break because you're doing so many other things, and you've probably got this is the time to study. But I hope you do get some rest over the next fortnight. That you have a safe and happy Easter. But
Thank
again,
you.
thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Phil. It's been fabulous. I've really enjoyed it. It's been much better than a night in front of the telly. I've enjoyed chatting to you. We must do it again.
Absolutely. Mate, you
Thanks,
have a
Phil.
great night.
You too.
Thank you so much for listening to the Tattoo Teacher podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it insightful. If you like what you heard, it would mean so much to me if you could either like, follow, and subscribe to whatever platform you are listening on. The music was by DJ Fruit Salad. Thanks again for listening. Stay cool. Be blessed.